The paramedic bay smelled like burnt coffee and rubber gloves, and I remember standing there at 4 in the morning with a clipboard I wasn't even reading, just waiting for the radio to crackle so I could hear if it was him. Rescue 9. Be advised, the loading dock gate is chained at that address. Cut through the side lot instead. A pause, unhurried, like he had all the time in the world even though he never did. Tell your partner the flashlight's in the side compartment tonight, not the back. I moved it after last week. Nobody else remembered where I kept my equipment. Nobody else noticed that I always lost the flashlight in the back compartment because the latch stuck. I sat in the passenger seat while my partner Duckworth drove, and I let myself smile at a windshield full of nothing, because a voice on a radio had just quietly taken care of me without asking for anything back. His name was Elias Voss, and I'd never once seen his face. 4 months of night shifts, and I knew him only as the low, even voice that came through Channel 2 right when things were falling apart. The one dispatcher who never sounded rattled, who somehow always had one extra piece of information that saved us 90 seconds we didn't know we needed. Other dispatchers barked addresses. Elias gave you the whole picture, like he was standing next to you in the dark, already looking where you needed to look. I started noticing things about myself that embarrassed me a little. I'd check the schedule board to see if he was on before I checked anything else. I'd catch myself sitting up straighter when the radio hissed to life, heart doing something stupid and fast, even though I was 31 years old and had pulled bodies out of car wrecks without my hands shaking. Duckworth caught me once, grinning at the dashboard after a call ended, and said, "You've got a radio crush, Marisol." It's a little sad, not gonna lie. "I do not have a radio crush," I said, which is exactly what someone with a radio crush says. "You hum when he talks." I do not hum. I hummed. I know I hummed, because I heard myself do it that very night, on a run out to a 3-car pileup on the interstate, freezing rain turning the whole world to glass. Elias's voice came through calm as ever, walking us through a road closure we hadn't been told about, and something in me just unclenched, the same way it does when somebody finally turns the porch light on for you in the dark. I don't know how to explain that kind of relief to somebody who's never needed it. Maybe you have. Maybe there's a voice in your life that does that too, one you never expected to matter this much, and I wonder sometimes if everybody's got one and just doesn't say it out loud. The pileup was bad. Not the worst I'd seen, but bad enough that my hands were shaking by the time we cleared the scene, adrenaline draining out of me all at once in the ambulance bay under the sodium lights. I sat on the back bumper with my helmet in my lap, and the radio on my hip clicked once, an open channel, not meant for me specifically, just dispatch checking in on unit status. "Rescue 9? You good out there?" Elias asked, and something in his voice had shifted, gone softer, aimed differently than the clipped efficiency he used for logistics. "Rescue 9's good," Duckworth answered, "because that's protocol." Then, because Duckworth apparently had no shame left in his body, he added, "Marisol's a little shook up, though. Might need a kind word." I nearly threw my helmet at him. There was a pause on the radio. A real one, longer than his usual half-second consideration, long enough that I wondered if he'd keyed off entirely. Then, "Tell her the road's clear from here to the station. No more surprises tonight. She did good work out there." That was it. 4 sentences. And I sat on that bumper in the freezing rain glow of the ambulance bay lights and felt more steadied by a stranger's voice than by anything else that whole miserable night. And I thought, not for the first time, this is a problem. You cannot fall for a man's voice. A voice doesn't have hands, doesn't have a face, doesn't have a single flaw you can point to and say, "Ah, there." That's the thing that makes him human, and not just an idea I built out of static and relief. I asked around, carefully, the way you ask around when you don't want anyone to know you're asking. Kayla in supply told me he'd transferred in from a rural county dispatch center about a year back, kept to himself, ate lunch alone in his car most days, good at his job to the point that senior dispatchers deferred to him even though he was young for it. Nobody had much else. He wasn't on the department softball team. He didn't come to the Friday potlucks. He was, as far as anyone could tell, exactly the voice I heard on the radio and nothing more, which should have told me something, but I was too far gone by then to hear it as a warning. 6 weeks after the pileup, dispatch sent everyone a memo about a joint training day. Medics and dispatchers together in the same room for once, running tabletop scenarios instead of working blind through a radio. My stomach did something complicated when I read the sign-up sheet and saw his name already on it. I signed my own name right underneath, then stared at it like it might change its mind. I told myself I'd recognize him. I don't know how I thought that would work, since I had literally never seen him. But some part of me was certain his voice would announce itself the second he walked into a room, that the calm would precede him like a scent. It didn't work that way at all. The training room was full of the ordinary chaos of 30 tired people drinking bad coffee out of paper cups, and I scanned every face looking for, I don't know what, some proof, and found nothing, until a man near the back said something to the group leading a scenario, correcting a detail about response routing in that same unhurried, considerate way, and I felt the floor tilt sideways under me. He was not what I'd built in my head, and also exactly what I'd built in my head, which is a strange thing to hold in your chest at the same time. Taller than the voice had suggested, quieter in his body than in his words, with a scar through one eyebrow and hands that fidgeted with a pen cap while he talked, nothing at all like the effortless calm of the radio. He looked up close, like a man who worked very hard to sound like he had it together. I didn't introduce myself right away. I sat through 2 scenarios pretending my attention was on the whiteboard, and then, at the break, I got my coffee at the same table he did, and some coward's instinct made me say, "You're Elias." From dispatch. He looked at me, and something crossed his face, quick and unguarded, before he answered. "I am. You're Marisol Reyes, Rescue 9. You know my voice." "I know a lot of voices," he said, but he was smiling a little, like we both knew that wasn't the whole truth. "Yours says copy faster than anyone else on shift, like you're already halfway out the door before I finish the sentence. I'm usually halfway out the door," I noticed. There it was, small as a struck match, but there. We stood by a coffee urn that smelled like burnt grounds and said nothing important for exactly the length of one break, and it was somehow the best 10 minutes I'd had off duty in months. He asked about the pile-up, whether I'd been all right after. I told him the roads had, in fact, stayed clear that night, like he'd promised. He looked pleased in a way that seemed to cost him something to show. "I worried about that one," he admitted. "I don't, usually. You get numb to it if you let yourself. All those calls, all those addresses. But that night, I kept the channel open longer than I needed to." "Why?" I asked, even though some reckless, hopeful part of me already suspected the answer. "Habit," I told myself for a while. He turned his coffee cup a quarter turn on the table, not looking at me. "Wasn't habit." I don't know what I would have said next, because that's exactly when his radio clipped to his belt buzzed, urgent, a call routing through even here, and the calm dropped over his voice like a curtain coming down, fast and total, and he was gone across the room to handle it before I'd even processed the shift. That was the thing about him I'd fall for, over and over in the months that followed. The way the steadiness wasn't an absence of feeling. It was a choice he made, call after call, night after night, so that whoever was scared on the other end of a bad address never had to hear it crack. We started finding reasons. A shared radio check that ran a little long. A coffee after a shift that happened to overlap. He'd tell me later that he used to sit in his car in the station lot for 10 extra minutes some mornings, listening to see if my unit would call in before he clocked out, telling himself it was just professional thoroughness, the same lie I'd told myself about not having a radio crush. We were both, it turned out, ridiculous in exactly matching ways. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't fast, because there's an odd tension in caring about someone whose whole professional value is staying detached from every voice on the line, mine included. There was a night, months in, when a call came through bad, a child involved, and I heard something in Elias's voice on the radio that I'd never heard before. The faintest hairline crack under the calm, there and gone in a breath before he steadied himself and got us where we needed to be. I never told him I'd heard it. Some things you let a person keep to themselves, even when you love them, especially when you love them. I've wondered since whether that's grace or cowardice, letting the people we care about wear their armor a little longer than maybe they need to. I still don't have a clean answer. Almost a year after that first training day, I sat in his kitchen at 6 in the morning after a joint double shift, both of us wrecked and grinning over eggs he'd somehow found the energy to cook, and he said, apropos of nothing, "I used to think I was good at my job because I didn't get attached to anyone's voice. And now? Now I think I was just waiting for the right one." He didn't look up from the pan when he said it, like it cost him less to say to the eggs than to my face, and I understood that shyness completely, because I'd built a year of feeling on 11-second radio transmissions, and I still went a little weak admitting it out loud. We got married 2 years after that, in a backyard, with half the department in attendance, and Duckworth stood up during the toast and announced to everyone, with zero mercy, that the bride used to hum every time the groom's voice came over the radio, and that he'd personally diagnosed the condition as terminal back before either of us admitted a thing. Elias laughed so hard he had to set his glass down. I didn't even bother denying it. There wasn't any point anymore. Sometimes, late at night, if I can't sleep, I'll turn the scanner on low in the kitchen, out of nothing but habit, the way some people leave the television murmuring for company. And every so often, his voice comes through, giving some other medic directions to some other address, steady and warm, and exactly the same as it was the very first time I heard it, back when he was nothing to me but static and a name I hadn't learned yet. I still feel that same unclenching in my chest, that same porch-light relief, and I think probably I always will. And I wonder if that's what it actually means to find your person, someone whose voice you'd know in 100 open channels, long before you ever learn the shape of their face.